This is a education session for Integrity Capital when it comes to the salespeople, loan associates in particular. And we're going to be talking about discernment or discerning the right fit, or sometimes we would say discerning who we're going to spend time with, as well as discerning who we're not going to spend time with. It's just probably more of the case than not. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what is it? When we say discernment or discerning the right fit, what are we even talking about? Definitionally, we would say here at Integrity Capital, this is the ability to judge well in determining if this is a healthy working relationship that is most optimal in pouring into. That's a mouthful. And there's a lot to that. But the first part of it is the ability. Part of discernment is really being able to be self-discerning. If you are not aware of what's going on in your own heart and mind, and you're not cognizant to it, self-aware is typically the buzzword that they use out in the marketplace. But if you lack self-awareness, then that would be the beginning place for somebody to grow in this area, is to have a sense of self-awareness. And then you might say, well, how do you do that? Well, that would be continual personal growth in learning about awareness, getting an understanding of what kind of thought life that you have and what's floating around in your own heart and mind. We typically call that head trash that we have floating around, and starting to be aware of that is a really good, and I would say even critical place to begin with self-awareness. A lot of times people will talk about blind spots where people don't see something in their own life. That's why we have good friends that will help us see where it is that we might have some blind spots, so that we can better judge, not in a negative way, because sometimes we hear judge and we think, oh, that's negative. And I would say, I'd even argue that we actually judge every day on a very consistent basis. I'm constantly making a judgment versus judging. I'm making a judgment call all the time. Do I go this direction or do I go that? Do I pick this thing or do I pick that? Do I spend my priority here or do I spend my priority there? We're constantly discerning and judging. So this isn't something new. We're probably just going to be more aware of it. And it's doing it well for the purpose of determining if this person or persons, if they're a healthy working relationship versus an unhealthy working relationship. We'll unpack that a little bit later. That is really most optimal. So maximizing what it is that we have, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do things in the most optimal way for this purpose. And I think this is really important, Dan, is to pour your servant resources into. So you think about that for me, you go, okay, well, why are you doing this? Well, to pour out and serve people like mad, offer as much value as we can. But just like anything, I don't have infinite resources to invest in the stock market. So I'm going to have to pick what is most optimal places I'm going to invest so I can get the most optimal return, given some of the criteria. So does that make sense, Dan? Is that at least just on the surface?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it comes up each and every time we talk to someone is we have to initiate that discernment and put those antennas up for the right cues. And, it's always better to identify those key items early rather than later on. So I really agree with that.
Great. So then the second question I think we have to ask ourselves is, why does this even matter? Why does this even matter? because that's always a question we want to ask when we're looking at something is, why do we do this? Why does this matter? Who cares? Might be another way to look at this if you have more of a analytical mind. And I really think there's 5 reasons that we'll walk through in a conversational way. We'll go back and forth. The first one is because, as I mentioned before, we are finite people with finite time. So when I say finite, that is obviously the antithesis of infinite. When I say infinite, we're talking about eternal or endless, ongoing time. And if we're honest, then we realize we only have a certain amount of time. It means we have 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and on and on and on. We only have X amount of time on this earth till we die. And so we have to recognize and accept that limitation. And then we just have to say, what do I do to maximize that given time that I've been allotted? So that's what we mean, Dan, when we're saying finite time. If you have anything else to chug into that, feel free.
That's perfect.
Great. Second thing is because it's very proactive. So Dan, maybe I'll have you unpack this a tad and I can clean anything up if there's any additional things. But why is discerning proactive?
Discerning is proactive really because as we have interactions with clients, partners, even lenders, it's always good to pick up on those cues early rather than find out those key barriers later on, or even character flaws or whatever it is that could come up. There's usually red flags or some kind of something that usually pops up, and it could be in the way someone's, the way they carry themselves or speak about a negative experience, or there could be a lot of different cues that we can pick up on that sometimes early on, and especially when we're newer in a role, it's hard for us to understand that these are red flags that we should be looking out for. So being proactive is not only part of our culture, but it's also a good opportunity for us to really emphasize the importance of getting ahead of this, especially with discernment, so that we don't run into any issues down the road that we may have been able to pick up on earlier.
Yeah, that's great. Getting in front of it in advance.
Exactly.
Preparing, having intervention, being anticipatory. That's what we mean by being proactive in discernment so that we can best mitigate future risk, which is really what we mean by proactive. Not necessarily that we could get rid of it, although there might be times we can, but specifically in this place, we might be able to proactively avoid going down the road, because that means you're going to avoid spending X amount of hours and time with something that might not end up being fruitful or unhealthy or toxic. And so the proactiveness is part of the reason why discernment is such a big deal. The third one is because it's considering others more important, and the decisions we make impact others. So let me give you an example. Let's say that I choose to go down the road in a relationship that's a working relationship that is unhealthy. We can certainly get into different definitions of that. Let's say that they're toxic in the sense that they are antagonistic or constantly causing strife. Well, when we do that, what we're essentially doing is we're not just having it impact us as individuals, but collectively, because there's other people that are involved in this process: the loan processor, the lender, the title company, the third party reports, other people within our company. This is what I mean when I'm saying, when we make the decision perhaps to say no to a relationship that might be unhealthy, then we are actually thinking of others more important than ourselves. And the reason I say that is because there's this temptation, and I say this not in a looking down on you, but I'm in the same boat as you to say, gosh, man, if I did this deal, it'd be a really nice commission. And so that temptation I recognize is there. And so we have to, when the minute we say no to something, we do really potentially say no to some money. That really is, it's realistic for us to say that. And so I'm completely understandable and sympathetic to the fact that when we make a choice to either say no or yes, because yes could also be a positive experience for the people that we do, we are actually considering it others more important. In fact, I'd even go to the extent, Dan, you can chime in on this, of saying we're considering them more important because we are actually saying we're not going to put you through this process that will create an unhealthy environment.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I absolutely love that. That's very true in many ways. Yeah, I agree.
So the fourth one, Dan, is it helps us develop healthy long-term relationships. And I think all of us would agree that we desire not just to make money and, not altruistic in the sense that, we're not doing this to make money. Of course we are. That's just, we have to live in a world where we have to have money to pay for things. But we are really also simultaneously wanting to develop good, long-term, healthy relationships, which not only benefit everybody in the long run from a business perspective, but it also could be perhaps just friendships that you develop over the long term with people that you work with. And so this is really why it matters to us, is because those relationships as you get older and older become more and more valuable because you realize how important relationships are above and beyond stuff and just success. And that in of itself is success, to have those kinds of good, healthy working relationships that create more peace of mind for people. So Dan, thoughts or comments on that for number 4?
Yeah, it's so true. The long-term relationship piece hits home really, really strong with me, especially. A lot of the times we look at, okay, we could do one thing together here or one deal, but then it ends up you experience so much in that process that it actually does, it can really connect you with the client or even the referral partner. So there's a lot of key moving parts that happen in that process that really you'll end up learning a lot about each other, and sometimes it actually becomes a beautiful thing where you can end up being friends or meeting up after work, or maybe having lunches or whatever it is. But um, the long term piece is really key, especially when you get comfortable working with each other as well. So then you don't really have to worry about the discernment piece as you get to know them as more and more. So I think it helps alleviate that the cautiousness along with the process.
I love that. So the fifth one is helps us live out disqualifying versus qualifying. I would probably speculate, and I think it would be a good speculation to say that if you work here for an extended period or even a shorter period of time, the one thing you're going to hear that comes out of all of the mouths here is we're in the business of disqualifying people versus qualifying them. Dan would certainly agree with that one. He's heard it probably hundreds of times at this point. But I think there is some truth to that. And so just the fact that we are going through an exercise of doing this, we are living out the reality of what we keep saying, which is we really need to make sure that we're disqualifying. And I just want to make one asterisk to all this, Dan, and I think to everybody else that's listening, it's really important that people understand that we're not trying to put ourselves on a pedestal or dehumanizing people or saying they're less than because we don't end up working with them. I think that's really important for people to notate, that we really believe that people are intrinsically valuable, means that they're made with value from birth. There isn't anything they need to do to gain value in themselves or lose it. It's just inherently already there. So we look at people and say, you're intrinsically valuable. Another way we say is you're made in the image of God. It means you just have value. But we do also recognize that we live in a world where, again, we have a limited amount of time, plus everybody has a little bit of a different value system. And so we're just trying to align with who is best suited with the values that we carry and hold to strong. And so it's just best suited that we try to line up with those that tend to fit and see the value that we offer. And so we just want to make sure it's clear that this is not us looking down on people, but it is just making a business decision based upon the values that we hold to be best suited for our firm. So now the question is how. And this is, we're getting into the meat and potatoes now. The how is this: you really need to know what you're looking for. You got to be a sharpshooter, not a shotgun. You look at someone that is a sniper or sharpshooter, they have a real particular target, and they're not just pulling out a shotgun and shooting all over the place. It's very, very pointed. And so we are looking for certain types of people. The first thing that we're looking for is character flags. There's a few things that we try to keep our antenna or our ears up as we're listening to people. We need to watch for greed. Is somebody greedy? Do they just want more and more and more and more? And it just never seems to end. It's just incessant. It might be obsessive. It's continual. It seems to be thematic for them. They don't ever really seem to let their guard down in that area. In fact, it's the focal point of almost most discussions. How can I get more? What's in it for me? How do I get this, 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 this? So again, not that it's bad for us to want things and go after things, but it becomes obsessive, becomes incessant, becomes almost over the top. So we're looking for that. We have an antenna up for greed, where something's never enough. Irritable, somebody that's just continuously, constantly irritable. Somebody that's agitated in an incessant way. Somebody that just is constantly annoyed with things that are going on, and they're verbalizing that on a consistent negative basis. We want to be careful about that, because if that's happening in the front end, then when we actually get into the tough stuff, then we're probably going to exasperate what is already going on in there. You've heard the old adage of, if you were nice when you're broke, you're going to be nice when you're rich. And if you're a meanie pants when you're broke, you're going to be a meanie pants on steroids when you're rich. Something we have to be really careful of. The other thing, and again, I'm careful on this, I don't know how the ways to put it, but somebody that just might be jerky. They're just rude. They just don't have manners. They're maybe just saying things, verbally attacking. They're berating somebody's character, constantly demeaning somebody, or somebody that just lacks integrity. You keep seeing them, asked to try to skirt the corner. Again, we're not looking for perfection. We recognize that we're all humans, so I don't want to be unrealistic with the fact that we're dealing with people. But again, if there is a over the top lack of integrity for somebody in the way that they respond into business, we just really need to be careful on looking for character flags. So how do we do this? That's one of the things. You just listen. You really just need to keep your antenna up to their responses. So if you become a good listener, you're going to hear what they say. People are creatures of habit. The way they speak to you, the way they speak about other people, the way they handle situations when pressure comes up. What is their demeanor towards you and other people? How do they respond? You need to keep your antenna up. So that's the first thing, is just character flags. Dan, is there anything that you'd like to add to that, or anything that I'm missing?
I think that's excellent. You definitely covered everything. Thank you.
The second thing is just non-victim mentality. So this is really important. Will this person take some form of personal responsibility? is there anything within their conversation when things go haywire or something happens that they are willing at some point within the dialogue to take personal responsibility? Or is this somebody that is continuously blaming other people? When you talk to them, is there consistent commentary centered around the idea that they think that everybody else has wronged them and they have been squeaky clean? That's what we're looking for. Or is this person someone that is willing to be balanced? They understand that they have some say in this, that there is something they can take some ownership. Again, we're not looking for Mother Teresa. We're just trying to find out, is there some general sense of character here where this person is not going to constantly blame other people? That can become a real red flag. We call that a non-victim mentality, because victims are always looking to blame somebody else for their circumstances, and they will never take personal responsibility, which, by the way, is somebody that cannot grow. You cannot grow unless you take personal responsibility. So that's somebody you really want to be careful to avoid. So, Dan, I don't know if you have any thoughts or chime in on anything along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, sometimes with individuals like that, you just have to be careful because we all sometimes have that soft spot where we want to give someone a chance. And I want to say 99.9% of the time I've done that, it has not worked out. So there's a reason for this training and why we should really pay attention to the key items being covered here.
Absolutely. And so, one of the ways you can do that, because again, we always say, well, how do you do that, Dave? Well, here it is. Here's a question I've asked, and I always listen up. Who have you worked with in the past on financing, and how was your experience? If you constantly hear negative things, blame, 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 which I have heard many times, that should be a warning signal for you to say, this might not be somebody that I want to go down the road, because when you're done with them, what do you think they're going to say to somebody else? So non-victim mentality. So character flags, non-victim mentality. The third one is numbers aligned. Numbers aligned. Are they someone who is a larger client? Good ongoing financial potential opportunities in the future. And again, people might say, well, gosh, Dave, you guys said your servants. Why would you say that? Again, we have to recognize we have lots of things we want to try to accomplish. And in order to do so, in the reality of the life we live, we have to be able to make money. We have to be able to pursue this. So there's nothing negative from our perspective. There's nothing that's a separation from being a good servant leader and having to make money and build wealth. I just don't see those two misaligned. Where they can be misaligned is if you have negative motives, wrong motives, and that becomes the sole desire of your life is money, 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 money. That's where things get dangerous. When that becomes the supreme overtaker of all things, is just that, because that's when you start making unethical decisions. You start to use people for the wrong reasons, as opposed to having the proper healthy balance. So, but again, you have to ask yourself the question, is this somebody that I see growing, expanding? There's good potential future opportunity here. Because again, you have to be able to choose where you spend your time. If you're investing in someone's a larger client, there's more opportunity. That's a good investment. It's just a good investment. It's good investment 101. And so you say, well, again, how do you do this? Well, you want to know, what types of deals do they work on? What is their plan on doing this business in the future? Are they planning on growing? Are they at the end of their career? They're going to be winding it down soon. Is this just a one-off for them and then things are going to be done? These are things that, and again, I'm not saying you're not going to work with somebody that just is one-off, but again, where do you want to spend most of your priority with a limited finite amount of time that you have? So you always want to say numbers align. This is a discerning thing. Is this a good investment for the future return on investment. Because again, if you're a good investor, nobody says, well, that's a negative thing if you're getting a great return on your investment. Now, if you do it in an unethical way, of course, yes. But you would just look at somebody and say, Warren Buffett, great investor. We don't look at him and say, well, that guy's a scummy guy. No, he's an ethical guy. He's a bright guy, and he wants to make the maximum return on his investment. So, Dan, anything on the numbers aligned, agreement, disagreement?
100% agree. I think this was excellent.
Fantastic. And the fourth and final one is values are process. I cannot emphasize this. Values are process. And I'd even say us as well. Will they submit to our process? Will they submit to our process? Our vision is to be the most proactive commercial mortgage brokers in the world. And so we have a very specific way that we want to do business. It's not because we're hyper control, it's because we want to do things in an orderly fashion that assures an outcome for the client when they're done, that they have confidence, they have restfulness, and they have peace of mind. And so for us, we really need to make sure that this is somebody that says, hey, I value you. I value your process. I value what you guys are doing. And by the way, that's not something you can manufacture. It's something that's either there or it's not there. And so for us to try to deceive ourselves that somehow we're going to change someone's perspective is really an exercise in futility. Our job is to just discern and recognize, is this the way they just are? Do they see things that we do and recognize the value in it? Will they submit to our process? And I believe that if you find that particular person, then you're going to have a massive success. If we follow the equation that the targeted client, which is what we're talking about today, discerning the right fit, plus the targeted lender and vendor, plus someone following our clear process equals a confident and restful client. That's success for us here at the firm. And so how do we do this? Well, we just ask them, how do you feel about working with a consultant like us? Are you willing to make sure you go down the process with us? And just find out as we walk through this with them if they're willing to do that or not. So really, at the end of the day, this is probably one of the most important things you'll do is to become excellent at discerning the right fit. And I'm confident that if you do so, you're going to have one heck of an amazing career. So this is the education for discerning the right fit for a client here at Integrity Capital.